Okay, this is lesson 19, a lesson we didn't get to yet. It's a two-part lesson, value word problems, and AA means AAA. So let's just jump in with example 1. These are really important kinds of problems. You're going to see them over and over again, so we need to get these down. So, Kara Magoo had 50 nickels and dimes whose value was $4. How many of each kind of coin did he have? I have a little note on the worksheet. If you want to pull your worksheet out and pause the video that I gave you in class so that you can just fill in the answers as we go, that would be great. But the note that I have here says that this is a value problem, which means that you're going to have two equations and two unknowns. Remember that you have to have as many equations as you have unknowns. The first equation will be dealing with the number of coins, like we have 5 nickels and 12 dimes. The second equation will deal with the value of the coins. So we know that each nickel is worth 5 cents and each dime is worth 10 cents. So one equation is just the number of coins. If you were to throw the coins out on a table and you counted how many pennies you had, how many nickels you had, how many dimes you had, and you would say, I have, for example, 36 coins. The second equation is the value of them. So each penny is worth 1 cent, dime's worth 10 cent, nickel, 5 cents, quarters, 25 cents, etc. So let's try to write these two equations. Remember, one is the value and one is the number of coins. So here we go. The first one, number of coins. Kara Magoo had 50 nickels, whose value was 4 and dimes. So we don't know how many nickels he had, how many dimes. We just know the number of nickels, and you'll see this is where we get our subscripted variables. The number of nickels plus the number of dimes. And that has nothing to do with the value. That's just counting the coins on the table. It's 50. You could have 20 nickels and 30 dimes, whatever combination you can think of. First equation. The second one is the value of the coins. So we know that we have each nickel. We're going to just move all the decimal points over. Instead of putting 0.05 for a nickel, we're just going to move all the decimal points over to make it easier. And we're going to say 5 times the number of nickels plus 10 times the number of dimes. And it's equal to $4. See the $4 here? But we have to be careful. $4 would be 4.00. So if we're moving our decimal point over, we're going to put 400 there. That's a tricky part when you're moving the decimals over right away. Now, as you can see, we can do elimination or we could do substitution. We've been talking a lot about if we have an equation where we can see all the numbers are divisible by the same amount, we could just divide that out right away. So let's do that since we've been practicing that. Number of nickels plus the number of dimes. It doesn't really save us much time, but it's a good practice for, I just do a lot of SAT prep, and this is something that helps on the SAT to recognize that. So we're going to divide everything by 5. And like someone suggested last time, if we just divide by a -5, it'll make these be able to add out. So we're gonna divide by a -5. So 5 divided by -5 is negative number of nickels. 10 divided by a -5 is going to be -2. And 400 divided by a -5 is going to be -80. So maybe it does save a little bit of time. So we're going to add these up. These will add out. So we're going to get negative number of dimes equals -30. And divide both sides by -1. So the number of dimes is going to be 30. And we have to go back up and figure out the number of nickels. We just put it right in. If we have the number of dimes is 30, we have the number of nickels is going to equal 20. And that is how we do coin problems, or they call them value problems, because they might not just be coins. We're going to find some really creative things in the Saxon books. So here we go. Example 2. For example, this one. The fishmonger sold codfish for 6 pence each. That's the value, right? And mussels for 1 pence each. If Harriet bought a total of 26 items and spent 86 pence, how many codfish did she buy? Okay, the first one's just the number of items. So we have codfish and mussels. So we know that the number of codfish plus the number of mussels equals 26. That's just the number, or is it 86? It's 86. I circled it and couldn't read it. Has nothing to do with how much they're worth. It's just if you threw them all on a table and counted them, that's what they would come up with. Now we're going to do our value equation. So the codfish are 6 pence, so 6 times the number of codfish, plus the mussels are 1 pence, so 1 times the number of mussels equals, whoops, I did do this wrong. I feel like I should start this over. 26. This is the 26, that's the number of items, and this is the 86. So items, 26, price, 86 pences. So we're going to multiply this by a -1, because you can see these are opposite. So number of codfish, negative number of codfish, minus the number of mussels equals negative number of items. And we have 6 number of codfish plus number of mussels equals 86. And from here on out, it's just a subscripted elimination problem. So we get 5 number of codfish equals 60. And the number of codfish equals 12. So we go back up to the easiest equation. So we have 12 plus the number of mussels equals 26, and the number of mussels equals 14. And that is all there is to these value word problems. You just need 2 equations. We did these last year, so it shouldn't be, it's really nothing new from last year. Unless you didn't have it last year, then it's brand new. So let's go, and there's one more type of problem, the AA versus the AAA. Let's talk about what that means by, I'm going to draw this. Wish me luck here. So we have 2 triangles. One is smaller than the other. The line feature is awesome for me, especially since I'm not the greatest drawer in the world. There we go. We'll go like that. Okay, so we have 2 triangles. This is actually example 3. And what they're going to give us is that this angle is congruent. Congruent just means the same thing as equal, except it's just comparing shapes without having numbers to them. So instead of saying, we would say like 30 degrees equals 30 degrees, but we don't have any degrees, we just have that they're the same shape, that they're equal. If you laid them on top of each other, they would match up perfectly. And we have this angle is congruent to this angle. Now, do you see how they're only giving us 2 angles? They're saying we have 2 angles in this triangle are congruent to 2 angles in this triangle. So the lesson title was AA means AAA. That means if you have 180 degrees and you subtract out these 2 angles, you're going to get this angle, right? And if you have 180 degrees and you subtract out these 2 angles, you're going to get the same angle. So if 2 angles in one triangle are congruent to 2 angles in another triangle, we know that the third angles are also congruent. So that's what it means by AA means AAA. And if all 3 angles in one triangle are congruent to all 3 angles in the other triangle, then you know the triangles are similar. And why do we care about that? Because if 2 triangles are similar, then their sides, their corresponding sides, are proportional. So let me just put some numbers on these. 4, 5, 7, y, and you did these last lesson, x, 6. And if you're looking for an extra credit for the quiz tomorrow, the extra credit is Mr. Demai is working at home today. So now you need to figure out how these match up. This is going to rotate. The second triangle could kind of just rotate on this point, and you can see that x and the 5 will line up because the angles have to match up. So if we were to rotate this way, this angle would match up with this one. That means x is going to line up with 5, and the 7 is going to go with the y, and the 4 with the 6. That's very important that you line up the angles with the angles. You can recopy it if you want and rewrite it facing the same direction if that helps. I mean, I guess I can try that. I'm just not confident of my drawing skills here. So I'm going to take this triangle and I'm going to rotate it around like this, something like this. So when I rotate it around, this angle is still going to be this one. We're going to have the 2 1 here, and we're going to have the 3 slash here. And between the 1 and the 3 is the y. Between the 2 and the 3, 2 and 3 is the 6. And between the 1 and the 2 is the x. So now we can kind of look at them like this. We can compare them. Or if you can just see that the x goes with the 5 without rewriting it, that's fine too. All right, now we just need to write our proportions. I always do the one that matches up the number part, so we have the 4 and the 6. I always keep that the same. So we have 4 over 6 equals, and then let's do x first. The 4 goes with the 6, so the 5 goes with the x. Keep the triangles, go the same way. 4, little triangle to big triangle, little triangle to big triangle. 5 over x, we cross multiply. 4x, you could reduce that before you start, keeps you from needing to reduce later. 30 over 4, so your answer is 15 over 2 for x. So x equals 15 over 2, and let's do our y. So we're going to use the 4 over 6 again. This time I'm going to reduce it just to be fun. Remember, that's the same as 4 over 6. I'm just reducing it. Whoops, I should write them right. It's 2 over 3. Which is the same as the 4 over 6. I'm just showing you how you can reduce it and then do the problem. Okay, so we did little to big, so 7 over y. So we get 2y equals 21. And this time we don't have to reduce it because we reduced it before we started, 21 over 2. So those are your two answers for x and y. Pretty simple. Okay, that is it for lesson 19.